Oh boy. Okay, so today we are going to be reviewing Poultrygeist. I don't really want to review Poultrygeist because it's one of the worst movies I have ever seen, but here we are. I'm reviewing Poultrygeist. And anyone who has watched my content for a while knows that I love a good B movie. I'm a man of poor taste, and I wear this as a badge of honor. For those of you blissfully unaware, Poultrygeist is a 2006 B-movie by Troma Productions that follows the life of a fast food worker whose restaurant is being taken over by a mysterious and evil force. It is full of gore, perversion, and its fair share of political incorrectness. Pretty standard fare for a B-movie. However, as I began to contemplate how, exactly, I was going to review Poultrygeist, I was reminded of a quote by John Waters, the Pope of Filth himself. To me, bad taste is what entertainment is all about. If someone vomits watching one of my films, it's like getting a standing ovation. But one must remember that there is such a thing as good bad taste and bad taste. It's easy to discuss someone. I could make a 90-minute film of people getting their limbs hacked off, but this would only be bad taste, and not very stylish or original. To understand bad taste, one must have very good taste. Good bad taste can be creatively nauseating, but must, at the same time, appeal to the especially twisted sense of humor, which is anything but universal. You see, I realize that I can't just review Poultrygeist. To fully explain why Poultrygeist is bad and something like, for example, Pink Flamingos is a filth masterpiece, there has to be a larger conversation here. As Kamala Harris would say, Poultrygeist exists in the context of all that was and all that has been, or something like that. One cannot simply review Poultrygeist. One has to put Poultrygeist in the context of what it is. A sloppy, gross, schlocky B-movie. So strap in and strap on, motherfuckers, because we are going on a wild adventure full of tits, blood, and the wettest of puppets. We are going to discuss the history of the B-movie. So there's a common misconception that a B-movie is like a grade. Kind of how reviewers would give a movie, say, 3 stars. Good movies get an A rating, bad, low-budget movies get a B rating. But that is not the case. You see, back in ye olden days of the 1900s, there was something known as a double feature. Science fiction, double feature. The A movie was generally some sort of blockbuster. It was the movie people went there to actually watch because they wanted to see a movie. And many people would simply leave the theater after the blockbuster if they had better things to do. However, during a double feature, there was usually a second movie that played after the first. And these movies were generally low-budget films that you could sort of tune out. It didn't have to make you think much, it just had to make you leave the theater having had a good experience. Early B-movies followed formulaic plots with good guys and bad guys. Westerns, gangster movies, that sort of thing. Eventually, low-budget horror movies and horror comedies were added to the mix. Because here's the thing about double features. If you were staying for the second movie, there's a pretty good chance you were there for one reason and one reason only. The B-movie quite often just served the purpose of being loud enough to cover up the sound of you making out with and or getting hand action from your date, while being entertaining enough that you didn't just get up and leave. It was the Netflix and chill of the early movie industry. Was that the intended purpose of the B-movie originally? No. Its original intention was to help studios recover cost on any potential flops, but that was absolutely what it became. It was the opportunity to get handsy in a dark room where everyone was facing forward. Dark rides at amusement parks were also used for this purpose, and while this was not the original intended purpose of dark rides, people tended to catch on fairly quickly. The tunnel of love existed for a reason, y'all, and just like amusement park owners caught on, so did movie theater operators. Movie theater owners realized that people didn't pay attention to the second movie as often. both because of the aforementioned sin or just because they were tired and less focused after the first movie. So it was far more financially profitable for the first movie to be a blockbuster and the second one to be a movie that they could buy on the cheap. People didn't really care as much what the second movie was, as long as they either got to tune out or spend more time with their date. And as long as the second movie wasn't so bad, it would ruin their night. But because these movies also helped ensure that studios could recover the cost if one of their A movies turned out to be a flop, the B movies did have to be, at the very least, entertaining. Low-budget movies tended to be able to get away with more than big-budget blockbusters did. Blockbusters needed to appeal to a lot of people. They needed to make a return on investment. B-movies really didn't need to do that. They were cheap to make, so being run as a double feature was generally more than enough to make up profits. This gave directors of these movies a lot more creative freedom. Their only real limitation, especially after the Hays Code was abandoned in 1968, was the budget. This meant that the directors of these movies were now fully free to bring whatever weird little vision they had to life, as long as it didn't cost too much. And the limited budget meant that writers and directors had to be really creative. They had to figure out ways to achieve certain practical effects with almost no money at all. And what you shot was what you shot. Because if you messed up the scene where some dude's arm explodes, you may not have the budget for another exploding arm. And if that was the case, you either just had to put the messed up scene in the movie or come up with a scene that was cheaper to shoot. It also meant that directors had more creative license to discuss taboo topics on screen. This meant that queerness, race politics, extreme violence, and gratuitous nudity were often on full display. As long as they entertained audiences, people didn't tend to complain. Or worse, ask for their money back. Thus, B-movies became associated with low budgets, gore, and most of all, perversion. And while many people didn't admit it, a lot of people loved these movies. Especially those people who didn't usually get to see themselves in big-budget blockbusters. Queer and black cinema thrived in this environment. However, this was complicated. While many people loved seeing themselves on screen and felt empowered by the films, they did also tend to play on the stereotypes created by white, straight, cisgender audiences. Marginalized people were often depicted as monsters, sex workers, and violent criminals. And to this day, these films are quite controversial in marginalized communities. You aren't really going to get a consensus on this one. There's a great deal of nuance here. One such genre of B-movie was the Blaxploitation film. And look guys, I know my lane. I'm not going to open that can of worms because I am the pastiest of boys, and I know when to not get involved in business that isn't my own. However, I did at least feel the need to acknowledge them, as their existence is important to the overall context here. But I'm absolutely positive that there are creators out there who have covered that far better than I can. So if you know a video essay like that, feel free to post it in the comments. And if I find one before this video goes out, I will put it in the description. Speaking of the description, that is also the place you will find my link tree, where you can find links to all the places you can follow me, as well as all the ways to ensure that I get paid. And I need money, because I need more radioactive eggs in order to ensure my gay agenda to ruin Western civilization doesn't fail. So if you would like to help me get those radioactive eggs, check out the link in the description. Now look, while I'm not going to sit here and lecture folks on the history of black cinema, I am more than happy to lecture folks on the history of queer cinema. That is an experience I can speak on. And I do have to say, I am one of the queer people who finds these movies fun and empowering. Movies like Glen or Glenda, a B-movie regarded as one of the worst ever made, is almost always capable of bringing me to tears. This film, no matter what you may think about it, is a story of a trans person, written, directed, and played by a trans person. Even if it's not technically good, it is meaningful. It is a scream that its director, Ed Wood, needed to get out, a feeling that would have driven them crazy had they not been able to create a piece of art about it. It is this eternal time capsule that says, we are here. We've always been here. And it becomes even more meaningful when you remember that unlike the character in the movie, Ed Wood never got their happy ending. Their girlfriend at the time, who plays the romantic lead in Glen or Glenda, did not accept Ed Wood the way the character in the movie did. They struggled with alcoholism and tumultuous relationships until their death. Glenn or Glenda allows Wood to live out their fantasy that, in the end, everything will be okay. That the great big Bela Lugosi pulling the strings in the sky still loves people like them.
Pull the string.
A great example of the aforementioned debate amongst marginalized people about these movies is the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
I'm just a sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania.
Which, if you are in the queer community, you know we have a discourse every single goddamn October about this movie, and probably will forever. The fact of the matter is that Rocky Horror is nuanced and complicated and means different things to different people. Some say it's an outdated relic of the past that needs to be left behind in favor of more nuanced and favorable portrayals of trans people. Other people say it was the first time they felt they had a valid excuse to cross-dress, and it helped them come out of the closet. And of course, every single year we debate who should and should not be allowed to play Frankenfurter. So I'm going to throw my hat into the ring. Frankenfurter needs to be played only by cishet white men as an exercise in humility. I'm kidding, obviously, but seriously, guys, can we be chilling about anything at all? We need to bring back ballrooms so y'all queens can read each other for filth outside the prying eyes of the straights. I swear to God. My point is, mileage may vary on these movies. Some people will see them as offensive. Other people will see them as empowering. And both are kind of right. Frankenfurter is not a good or accurate depiction of the trans community. The character plays into outdated stereotypes about trans people. However, Frankenfurter is relentlessly fun and quite meaningful for a lot of queer people who felt they finally had a place to truly be themselves. Both things are true. But when it comes to me personally, I would much rather watch Frankenfurter than Rose fucking Noble in Doctor Who. Now, no shade at all to Yasmin Finney. Okay, a little bit of shade. I don't actually think she's a very good actress. I'm sorry, don't come for me. I love Doctor Who, but honestly, even if she was a good actress, she was given no material. Rose Noble has been in, 4 episodes of Doctor Who now, and I still know nothing about this woman, except for the fact that she's trans and that she makes stuffies, I think. Maybe, I don't know, I might be confusing her with another character, honestly. But when Tim Curry bursts into the room as Frankenfurter, you know immediately who this character is and what their deal is. And not just because he sings a song about it. The lighting, the costuming, the script, everything about this character is allowed to live and breathe. Frankenfurter is openly and unapologetically queer. And look, I know this world is full of boring-ass trans people who want to be boring and live boring lives, and they deserve representation too. And that's fine. I'm glad Rose Noble exists for them. Rose Noble's character exists to say, look, see, trans people are just normal people with normal lives doing normal things, and that's great. I think we desperately need that kind of representation, especially in the world we live in now, where we are being actively dehumanized. But where Rose Noble's character is meant to humanize, Frankenfurter doesn't seem to care all that much whether he's humanized or not. Rose Noble wants to be accepted. Frankenfurter wants to be free. Now, I've talked about this particular tension in the queer community over on TikTok. The tension in the community between those who want acceptance and validation and those who want liberation and the preservation of queer culture. And I've spoken extensively about how there's going to have to be compromise so that those who want acceptance don't become assimilationists and those who want to preserve queer culture can actually accept change. This is divided a lot along generational lines and is due to a lot of factors that include everything from social media to the AIDS epidemic. How you experience queerness is going to affect how you view these films. That is simply the reality of the situation. So before you go into them, just know that what might be offensive to you might be deeply meaningful to another queer person, and vice versa. And with all that in mind, we need to talk about trauma films. Troma Entertainment is a low-budget film production company founded in 1974 by Lloyd Kaufman and Michael Herz. The films they produce tend to be surreal horror comedies with gratuitous sex and gore. And for as schlocky as their films are, they have produced many a rising star, including Samuel L. Jackson, J.J. Abrams, Billy Bob Thornton, and Matt Stone and Trey Parker, all of whom can at least partially credit Troma for their rise to fame. Their first notable hit was The Toxic Avenger in 1984, a comedy horror film about a superhero that was created when a disabled janitor was tossed into a vat of toxic waste by an evil gym bro. This movie spawned multiple sequels, an animated television show, and a stage musical. There is a theme in a lot of early Troma films of people who are outcast, overcoming obstacles, and triumphing over evil. This usually involves people losing their limbs in very creative ways. And if you are some sort of outcast, this portrayal can be really fun. It's a sort of power fantasy for those who feel left out by society in some way. The Toxic Avenger isn't just Melvin the janitor. The Toxic Avenger is all of us. And for once, just once, we get to watch that crazy jock who bullied us in high school get thrown out of a moving car. The Toxic Avenger's love interest is also a blind woman, and while her disability is somewhat played for laughs, she is a really cute and fun character, and it is a depiction of a disabled woman who is seen as a legitimate and desirable love interest. Actually, she and the Toxic Avenger are both seen as desirable love interests, with everyone from women to gay men fawning over him. In the end, the town comes together over the mutual love of the monster who has made their town a better place to live. The Avenger and his girlfriend are cherished members of society. And even when marginalized people are portrayed as villains or there are stereotypes at play, they tend to be relentlessly fun. Like Frankenfurter, they are allowed to just chew the scenery. Their motivations are absurd, and they seem to delight in their own evil. They are iconic, and you love to hate them. This makes the payoff of them being torn to shreds even more satisfying. Some of my favorite villains include a trans woman named Nipples, who is only on screen for like a minute and a half, and the whole time she's trying to kill a cop.
I don't think O'Clancy will take the money. Everyone says he's an honest cop.
Come on now.
This is a Nipples stan account. We love her. Now look, she is clearly being played by a cis man in a cheap wig. And in this instance, I simply do not care. It was 1984 and she's amazing. My other favorite queer depiction in Troma films is the entire gang of non-binary people from Nukem High. Like, did they sell a bunch of radioactive marijuana to high school kids? Yeah, and that was wrong. But also, they look like this, so I can't really be that mad at them, you know? Queer-coded Troma villains are a lot like queer-coded Disney villains. Is it good representation? Not really. But you have so much fun watching them and delight in their evil that you don't really care. But quite often in these early Troma films, the villains are not marginalized people. The vast majority of the villains, and by far the most evil ones, tend to be cishet white people with an open hostility towards diversity. These are the people who tend to be the most depraved and seem to rape, murder, and torture purely for the thrill of it. These movies often show how these individuals in particular are able to run amok with few consequences until the hero shows up. How they either play on the biases of the townsfolk to continue on with their depravity, or they intimidate people into submission. A wonderful example of this is the 1987 film Surf Nazis Must Die.
Sometime in the near future, a major earthquake will come out of the rubble, will rise a menace far more terrifying than the death and destruction. Surf Nazis.
Honestly, it's a toss-up between this one and Nukem High on which one is my favorite Troma film. Now, let me be very clear. This movie absolutely plays into stereotypes. A lot of them. Most of them, if I'm being honest. The lead character, Mrs. Washington, is very much a Blaxploitation character. However, Surf Nazis Must Die is also the story of an elderly black woman seeking revenge on a bunch of Nazis for lynching her son, and it's fucking cool. It's cool, it's fun to watch. Every moment that Mrs. Washington is on screen smoking cigars and beating the hell out of stupid crackers is a delightful moment of my life, and I will not apologize for feeling that way. And like, the film is called Surf Nazis Must Die. We know who the villains are. We know they suck from the very beginning. So when they get blown to pieces or skewered or decapitated by a boat propeller, especially when all of that is done by a black woman seeking revenge for a lynching, there is a catharsis to that for marginalized people. It satiates our desire for justice in an unjust world. For once, we get to sit and laugh at the misfortune of those who would gleefully do all of these things to us in real life. It is this subversion that makes trauma films enjoyable. They may play into some stereotypes, but they are also always very clear about who the villain is and what behavior is and is not tolerable. The death of Mrs. Washington's son is treated as a genuine tragedy. Actually, it's one of the few deaths in a trauma film that is treated with heaviness. You don't actually see the kill. It happens off screen, and you see how Mrs. Washington responds to it. You see her despair. You see her rage. You understand entirely why she is on this warpath, and you want her to succeed. So when she cuts the head off that Nazi bitch with a boat propeller, you cheer. It is clear that, while not perfect, those early trauma films did, to some extent, know when a topic needed to be treated with respect. And while they did not always do it perfectly, the attempt was made to create a story that was meaningful. But that brings us, unfortunately, to Poultrygeist. Oh, Jesus. Okay, so let me just be perfectly frank. I wrote the entire first draft of this review up to this point without actually finishing Poultrygeist. Fortunately for me, when I went back to watch the rest of the movie, absolutely none of my opinions had changed at all. Because, you see, Poultrygeist commits the worst sin possible for a movie like this. It's fucking boring. It's so fucking boring. This thing is an hour and 45 minutes long, and it feels like 500 years. Why on earth a trauma film ever thought it was a good idea to be this long is beyond me. Most traumas sit at around an hour and a half tops. Poultrygeist adds an extra 15 minutes of runtime, and while that doesn't seem like a lot, I assure you, you feel every single second of it. To show you how boring this movie actually is, here is some footage of me stoned as shit trying to get through this slogfest. It's so long. It's so long. Endlessly long. Why are you laughing at me? All of these people are taking way too long to die. They're taking way too long to die. I'm gonna need them to die more quickly than this. These characters are so stupid. I can't handle it. I can't handle how stupid they are. I remember checking the clock multiple times during this movie, knowing I would have to finish it so I could actually do the review, and knowing I couldn't back out because I'd already written 7 pages of this fucking video essay. So look, before we continue, I'm going to go ahead and give this movie compliments where they are due. There are a great deal of creative kills in this movie. Those are a staple of trauma films, and on that front, this movie does not disappoint. However, it takes a full half hour to get to any of them. Part of the reason I didn't finish this movie before writing the first part of this essay is because I had just watched 30 minutes of this movie and there was not a single fucking kill. Now, to be fair, trauma films do often save their most creative kills for later on in the movie, but many times they don't, as kills are often used to establish the villains of the story as, well, villainous. The villains have to do something that justifies all the gore that comes later. That's what makes us root for the hero. And see, that's where this whole thing really fucks up. Because while trauma is no stranger to morally gray characters, part of the joy of these movies was their simplicity. And they needed that simplicity, because the team at Trauma, frankly, does not have the chops for anything else. And unfortunately, this movie is very much a product of its time. You see, the early 2000s was the heyday of shock humor. You know, South Park, Drawn Together, Tom Green's entire career. And during this time period, there was this sort of pervasive belief that it was okay to be offensive as long as you offended everyone equally. But that's kind of not how this works. It neglects to understand that society is full of hierarchies, and so it mostly just ends up being a lot of punching down at people who were already down. Where Surf Nazis Must Die was smart enough to cast the Nazis as the ultimate villains and the hero as one of the most marginalized people in society, Early 2000s shock humor goes, man, people sure are all crazy, and we are all sure just awful, aren't we? It is the Joe Rogan of social and political commentary. Now, some of that stuff is still really fun, especially when it's pulled off with grace and or absurdity. I am one of the few people on the left who still feels a tiny bit hurt when people shit on Avenue Q, even though I understand completely why people feel the way they do about it.
Everyone's a little bit racist sometimes. Doesn't mean we go around committing hate crimes.
However, it is very difficult to do early 2000s shock humor without veering headfirst into direct idiocy and, as John Waters would call it, bad taste. As you watch this movie, you get the sense that Lloyd Kaufman is trying to capitalize on the success of his proteges Trey Parker and Matt Stone. But while those two can, most of the time, thread the needle, this movie does not. A lot of Trey Parker and Matt Stone's writing revolves around current events and somewhat nuanced political commentary. And even though I tend to very much disagree with their politics a lot of the time, they can at least make me laugh. This new season especially is great.
Would you like me to apply the baby oil to Satan's asshole, boss?
But Poultrygeist doesn't do that. It doesn't know how to thread the needle. It's very clear that Kaufman had some bones to pick, pun completely intended, and he planned on using this film to pick them. And had this been in the hands of a more skilled team, some of the elements may have worked. There are several commentaries in this movie that actually would have been interesting to explore, but we can't explore them because the movie is simply too stupid to have a nuanced conversation. They are trying to capture the success of South Park, and it's not working. I felt like I was just waiting for everyone to die the entire time. And when I say waiting, I do mean waiting. Like I said, this movie was a slog. I kept waiting for it to make me laugh. I laughed exactly one time in the entire hour and 45 minutes, and I'm not proud of it. I don't even think I would have found that joke funny if the movie hadn't just spent its entire runtime wearing me down. By the time the joke came around, I think I was just desperate for dopamine. All the characters are so fucking annoying too. Like, just the worst people ever. And not in an it's always sunny kind of way either. More in like a Jar Jar Binks kind of way. It is an hour and 45 minutes where every character is as annoying as Jar Jar Binks. It suffers from what I like to refer to as American Horror Story syndrome, which is where the film is so poorly paced and every character is so utterly unlikable that you can't even enjoy the story anymore. It loses all sense of tension because you are simply sitting there waiting for people to die so you don't have to deal with them anymore. And then when they do, you can't even enjoy it because the movie just wasted so much of your goddamn time, it doesn't even feel worth it. God, I fucking hate Ryan Murphy. We as the gays cannot let that man keep getting away with this. I know he gave us Feud and Pose, but it's time, y'all. It's time to let him go.
There's not going to be a
Good season of American Horror Story.
you stupid slut.
Where early trauma films set out to tell a story and the shock elements happen as the plot progresses, this movie very clearly aims to offend as many people as possible and then builds a story around doing that. This leads to Poultrygeist having something none of the early trauma films did: cynicism. This is a cynical, nihilistic movie. Everyone is stupid. Everyone is terrible. I was rooting for exactly zero of these characters, and thank God the movie was at least smart enough to kill literally everyone at the end, because leaving a single one of these idiots alive would have been a tragedy. Let's compare this movie to another shock film made years earlier by an actually competent filmmaker. That movie is, of course, John Waters' 1972 filth masterpiece, Pink Flamingos.
Kill everyone now. Condone first-degree murder. Advocate cannibalism. Eat shit.
I chose this film because Pink Flamingos and Poultrygeist actually have a lot in common. They both set out to be intentionally offensive. They both rely heavily on the audience feeling disgust. And they both have scenes where someone fucks a chicken. So I think it's safe to say we are dealing with the same general genre here. But Pink Flamingos is very simple. It's very clear on where the audience's loyalties should lie. We don't want the marbles to win. We want to root for Divine and her weird little chosen family, despite the fact that they are all bizarre, murderous psychopaths.
We're going to kill you. Kill, kill, kill. Shoot, shoot, shoot.
John Waters allows his characters to come alive, and through them we are transported into a world where having a competition for who is the filthiest person alive is a perfectly normal thing for people to do. Early trauma films have a similar effect on the audience. This isn't our world. This is a world where reality is turned upside down, where people just sort of do things. The audience must be lulled into this bizarro dream world. If they aren't, things start falling apart and a lot of really nasty cracks start forming. And Poultrygeist is the embodiment of all those nasty cracks. The setting is a bit too familiar. The people are a bit too much like idiots you know. I know weird perverts like Arby. I know college student protesters who don't know their activism from their asshole. Our whole goddamn planet is being destroyed by guys like the General, and those guys have their finger-licking fingers in every single crevice of our politics.
If I were running The View, I'd fire Rosie. I mean, I'd look her right in that fat, ugly face of hers. I'd say, Rosie, you're fired.
I'm not transported. I'm just living through a really boring version of my current reality. Because under the Trump administration, if we ended up with zombie chickens, I'd just be like, okay, I guess this is what we're doing today. We're in the zombie chicken apocalypse now. And people would sit around having TikTok discourse about whether or not it's ethical to kill a zombie chicken. And some guy on a podcast would be like, the General is actually the greatest hero of our time. And I really don't want to deal with all that, man. I'm tired. Poultrygeist is a bit too much like modern America, because modern America is beyond satire. Jokes about liberal protesters hit kind of weird when we see protesters being deported and imprisoned and trampled by horses in the streets. Jokes at the expense of racial minorities hit different when those minorities could be shipped off to a prison camp in El Salvador. And the edgelord humor of the early 2000s hits differently when some of the most powerful people on Earth have used that sense of humor to meme us directly into a fascist oligarchy.
I am become meme.
And in that way, maybe Poultrygeist isn't the movie any of us wanted, but it is the movie we as Americans probably deserve. We have created a world where this bizarro chicken movie hits a bit too close to home. And you can say that it isn't that deep, but it is incredibly clear that the movie is, indeed, trying to be that deep. It bashes you over the head with its idiotic, incomprehensible political messaging constantly. And if it wasn't doing that, it was hitting you with one-liners to ensure that you got the joke.
Jambalaya! Crawdaddy! Po' boy! Gumbo! Goddammit!
He's turned into a blackened Cajun chicken!
I don't need dialogue to tell me that the black guy screaming about jambalaya who turned into a chicken zombie is a blackened Cajun chicken. I understood the joke perfectly. The film language told me this already. The joke was dumb and racist the first time, okay? The whole time I felt like Elon Musk was breathing down my neck going, haha, did you get it?
I am become meme.
Yes, I got it. I just don't find it funny. It didn't make me laugh. And that is the emotion these morons in power have been relying on for like a decade now. They are relying on the people who genuinely did not get the joke to be too embarrassed or uncomfortable to admit it and just go along with it. Then those of us who absolutely did get the joke but were unimpressed are positioned as killjoys. And now we are. Now we are killjoys, because edgy humor has become a minefield. Media literacy is at an all-time low, and babes, these people do not understand the difference between good bad taste and bad taste. And maybe that's because a lot of people never really had good bad taste to begin with. These fascists have been able to slide under the radar by acting like silly fools, and a lot of people just didn't take them seriously. And now we have a broccoli-haired 19-year-old named Big Balls stealing all of our social security numbers. In the 80s, that event alone probably would have been the ridiculous plot of a villain in a trauma movie. And in that trauma movie, a gay dude who got plowed by a radioactive dildo that gave him super strength would have come in and electrocuted Dr. Musk and his sidekick Big Balls by smashing their heads through a computer screen. As stupid as it feels to say, our lives kind of depend on people knowing the difference between good bad taste and bad bad taste. And that is a very hard thing to teach because people are dumb and comedy is subjective. There will absolutely be people who don't agree with anything I've said in this video for valid reasons. There will absolutely be people who are offended by pink flamingos. There will absolutely be people who just don't like edgy humor, and that's fine. You don't have to. It's certainly not for everyone. But it really sucks to have stories that were once really meaningful to a lot of marginalized people be used in this way. And now, more than ever, it is kind of important to make all of these dudes feel like sorry losers who tell bad jokes. Because it deflates them. Their entire worldview is built around them being funny and smart and cool and powerful, and the second you bruise that ego, they fall apart. And I have a story to prove it. Okay, so now it's time for a little tea. I promise there's a point to this, I just need you to bear with me. A few months ago, I had my own chicken-related incident with a political pundit named Matt Walsh. Matt is, in the truest definition, a stochastic terrorist. And lucky little me, he decided to use me in one of his haters compilations. Now, when I first saw this, I'll be real, I was like, oh fuck, my life is about to be really shitty for a month. Because I assumed that Matt was coming for me for being trans or for being a queer minister, or because I look like a tadpole in a hat. Any number of these things would have been material for him. But then I watched the video, and I could tell that Matt wasn't just doing his find a trans person on TikTok and make fun of them bit. No, I had made a video about Matt Walsh that had truly, genuinely hurt his feelings, and he was bitter. You see, a little while ago, a chicken restaurant opened up in my town. This chicken restaurant happened to have Black owners. This chicken restaurant's owners also happened to be real assholes. And not only were they real assholes, they were very openly and boldly real assholes. Not just to their customers, but also to their employees. The initial discourse had started because rumors had been swirling about the mistreatment of their employees, and because they refused to offer ketchup. People thought the ketchup thing was pretty silly and made some memes about it. This also became a boon to other Black-owned businesses in the area who jokingly put out memes like, come to our restaurant, we have ketchup. I live in a small town. These kinds of memes are not uncommon here. There's many a joke about a great deal of our local business owners. Word gets around when a business owner is an asshole. At the time I was writing this, there was an active protest against a car salesman turned local politician named Chris Miller for calling a man with no arms or legs chicken nuggets, and the memes against Chris Miller have been glorious. Look, I put up with that man's transphobic ads interrupting Bob's Burgers for months, and so it has been very nice to see him get his. Anyway, these chicken restaurant owners didn't really like the ketchup memes very much, so they got online and made an unhinged rant about Indian and Chinese people while accusing everyone in town of singling them out for being a Black-owned business. Well, that just made everything worse. So then memes were not just made about the ketchup, but about their tirades over other racial minorities as well. And somehow, Matt Walsh got a hold of this story. Because, you know, Black people and chicken, a honing beacon went out to all of the racists, I guess. And what should have simply been small-town gossip became Matt Walsh's racist national discourse. After that, the memes weren't fun anymore. Because you see, we liked the memes because we had the context associated with them. We, in this town, had been dealing with these restaurant owners being assholes to our community members. Matt liked the memes because he likes it when bad things happen to Black people. That's it. That's why Matt liked the memes. And after, they felt kind of icky to associate with. He'd gotten his weird racist stink all over them. He killed the entire vibe. So I made a video about Matt Walsh being a killjoy and destroying our chicken memes. And that was the video Matt used in his haters compilation. The whole time he was trying to sound logical, but he sounded flustered as shit. I had hurt this man deeply in his soul, and I hadn't even tried. For years, I'll be honest, I had kind of seen Matt Walsh as a big bad, a nemesis, a psychopath with no real human emotions. And frankly, I was frightened of him. I'm not afraid to admit that. The man puts out content that encourages people to send bomb threats to children's hospitals. That's scary shit. But there he was, the baddie, the self-proclaimed theocratic fascist himself, blubbering over how he didn't kill the meme and getting so flustered that he tried to misgender me and ended up gendering me correctly. And all that fear I had of him just sort of melted away. I saw him for who he truly was, a pathetic sad sack whose only joy is making other people's lives worse. And that doesn't scare me anymore. I'm actually a little ashamed of myself for ever letting myself be afraid of him. So we can't forget what those early trauma films teach. Yes, these people are dangerous. They will kill you. They have no problem doing that. But they are also laughable. They're losers. They're sad sacks. And their heads roll the same as anyone else's. We can't let them take our joy away from us. Our joy is too precious, too finite, and too powerful. Poultrygeist fails for the same reason America is failing right now. It's pathetic, boring, and edgy for the sake of it. It promotes stupid ideas that only stupid people would believe. It fundamentally misses the mark on every conceivable level. Both Poultrygeist and this current administration can never be great, because they don't understand that in order for any of this to work, the underdog has to win. And more importantly than that, the surf Nazis must die.